"You're free now," Nancy said, smiling at the audience, while I stood next to her, still holding her hand. That was the last line of her speech. The stage lights were warm, the claps were thunderous, and my heart, it wasn't beating anymore, it was crumbling quietly behind my ribs. I was supposed to be the supportive boyfriend in her live stream celebration. What she didn't tell me was that it would double as our breakup revealed. She hadn't even told me we were breaking up. Not through text, not in person. She said it was live, in front of 3,000 viewers, with balloons, confetti, and single error unlocked flashing behind her. I didn't speak. I couldn't. Because Nancy had always been like that, performative, pristine, poisonous in the most charming way possible. After the live stream ended, she handed me a glass of champagne and said, "Don't look so upset, they loved it, you're trending." She tapped her phone screen like that would fix the hollow growing inside me. I left, quietly, didn't make a scene, didn't cry, didn't say her name. That night, I drove to the same hill where Nancy once said, "This will be the place where we build our house someday." Now it was just a parking spot for broken promises. I sat there in silence, car engine off, cold wind brushing through the cracked window. I stared at the city lights like they owed me answers. The next morning, George called. "Saw the clip," he said. "You all right?" I said, "Not really." He paused. "Want to work with me? I've got a startup. We need someone who knows how to stay quiet and get shit done." That was George, direct, brutally honest, just what I needed. I moved in with him a week later, no luggage, just a duffel bag and a laptop. We didn't talk about Nancy again. I didn't post anything. I didn't go online. The internet wanted drama. I gave them silence. 3 weeks later, Kathleen found me. She walked in to George's co-working studio with 2 cups of coffee and no questions. She hadn't texted since Nancy's stunt, and I half expected her to pick a side. Instead, she sat across from me, pushed the coffee forward, and said, "You look like you haven't slept since the betrayal livestream." I smirked. "You watched it?" "Unfortunately, yes, Nancy tagged me in it." I let out a quiet laugh. Not because it was funny, just because it was pathetic how far Nancy would go to monetize my downfall. Kathleen didn't smile back. She just looked at me, her expression still, thoughtful. "You want to disappear?" she said. I nodded. "I already have." "You shouldn't." I looked at her, tired. "Why not?" "Because she broke you in public, David. Heal in public too." I shook my head. "That's not me. I don't need revenge." Kathleen leaned forward. "It's not revenge. It's reclamation." Those words stuck. That night, I opened the editing software again for the first time since the breakup. Not to post, not to trend, just to remember how it felt to make something mine. A 45-second clip. Me sitting in the corner of George's studio, looking into the lens. No music, no captions, just a voiceover. She broke me in public, so I healed somewhere quiet. Somewhere she can't reach, even with all her cameras. I didn't even upload it. But Kathleen did. And it spread, quietly, like smoke under a locked door. Not viral, but sincere. The comments weren't from followers, they were from people. And suddenly, I remembered. I was a person too. When I was 17, I believed people couldn't change, they only revealed who they were over time. Nancy proved that to me, painfully, spectacularly. Back then, she wasn't Nancy, the queen of social media. She was just the girl who wore oversized hoodies and spoke in quiet tones in the back row of our literature class. She smelled like vanilla and jasmine shampoo, and her laughter, when it came, sounded like it had been waiting days to escape. I was the opposite, reserved, yes, but focused. I wanted to make documentaries, not reels. I had a camera in my hand before I had a proper phone. I was fascinated by people who said one thing and meant another. Nancy fascinated me from day one. We started dating at 18. Our first date wasn't even a date. She asked me to film her poetry reading for a college event. I remember looking through the viewfinder and watching her speak, softly, nervously, her hands shaking as she clutched the mic, but her voice, her words, they filled the room. Later that night, she texted me, "You made me look like someone I want to be." And just like that, we were something. By 20, we were the couple everyone knew. I was the guy behind the camera. She was the girl who bloomed in front of it. Nancy started a vlog channel. It was small at first: book reviews, self-care routines, some poetry. I helped with the editing, music, thumbnails. She called me her human tripod. I didn't mind. She was happy. And when Nancy was happy, the world felt quieter. I proposed at 24. She said yes before I finished the question. There was no ring, just a wooden bracelet I carved in an art residency program. I thought that would be enough for her, something real, imperfect, raw. She cried when I gave it to her. But 2 months later, she swapped it for a Tiffany one and told her followers it was custom and David's idea. That was the first time I felt like a prop. Still, I didn't say anything. Because love, I thought, means letting the other person grow, even if it means shrinking yourself. The fame didn't bother me at first. She grew fast, crossed 100,000 subscribers by year 2. Her content evolved, from poetry to product placements, from vulnerability to strategy, from quiet Nancy to Nancy the brand. At 25, I had stopped working on my documentary projects. I was filming sponsored skincare videos and couple QAs with juicy secrets for thumbnails. Every time I looked into the lens, I saw someone who looked like me but didn't speak like me anymore. We were still together, still laughing on cue, still calling each other my forever, online. But something had changed. Nancy began scheduling our dates around content. "This restaurant has a nice bathroom mirror," she once said while booking us dinner. "We'll do an outfit transition reel." At night, she would scroll through comments until she fell asleep. Sometimes, she'd whisper, "They really like you more than me. You're charming when you're quiet." And I always smiled. Quiet charm, after all, was my thing. Enter George. He wasn't just my university friend, he was the guy who pulled me back from the edge I didn't even know I was leaning off. While Nancy was polishing every corner of her digital kingdom, George was building something offline, a real-world app, a productivity tool, and, unintentionally, a refuge for people like me. He once said, "The world doesn't need more noise, it needs a pause button." He offered me a job after seeing me disappear from socials for 2 months. "I figured you finally got tired of being a background character," he said. I nodded. With George, I didn't have to explain myself. I moved into a guest room at his co-working villa 3 weeks after Nancy's public breakup stunt. I brought 1 suitcase and 3 hard drives. George didn't ask questions. Just handed me a passcode to the main door and said, "There's coffee, no cameras, do what you want." And then there's Kathleen. Kathleen, unlike Nancy, never needed an audience to exist. She was deliberate, every word she spoke came with weight, she didn't talk unless she meant it, and when she looked at you, it wasn't to see how you looked on camera, it was to see if you were okay behind your eyes. She was a mutual friend, more like a ghost in our social circle, always present, rarely in the spotlight. Nancy used to call her boring. I used to think she was just shy. Turns out, Kathleen just didn't like pretending. She and Nancy had known each other since college. They were friends in the way dorm roommates become friends, close because of proximity, not similarity. Kathleen would often visit our place when Nancy needed a second opinion on a video edit. While Nancy rushed to change outfits every 10 minutes, Kathleen would quietly organize Nancy's desk or make tea without being asked. Once, I asked her, "Why do you help her so much?" She replied, "Because it keeps her calm, and when she's calm, you look less tired." I didn't know what to say to that. She had always seen me. After the breakup stunt, when Nancy stood on stage and said, "We're going our separate ways," with a smile brighter than our engagement day, Kathleen was the only one who didn't clap. She left halfway through the event. 2 days later, she showed up at George's place. "I figured you'd be here," she said, holding a camera battery I'd once left in her tote bag. She didn't ask how I was. She sat on the floor, plugged in the battery, and watched me work. At some point, she asked, "You ever plan to tell people your side of the story?" I didn't respond. Kathleen added, "Because if you don't, she'll make it her brand." It wasn't a threat, it was a quiet warning. That's when I realized what had really broken me. Not that Nancy ended things, not that she did it publicly, not even that she laughed afterward. What broke me was that she made our entire relationship into a product, a finale. an ending arc to complete her channel narrative. I wasn't a person. I was an event. Kathleen, George, they didn't try to rescue me, they didn't tell me to fight back, they just gave me something no one else had, a space that didn't ask me to perform. It had been a month since the breakup clip went viral. Nancy had started a new series titled Single and Thriving. The thumbnails were colorful, her followers called her brave. Some of our mutuals unfollowed me quietly, a few asked if it was real, one or two joked, "You got dumped for the algorithm, man." I laughed with them, but inside, I was starting to remember who I used to be. Now, every morning, I wake up before sunrise. George's place is quiet at 5 a.m. Kathleen joins me sometimes on the roof. We drink coffee in silence. Watch the city wake up beneath us. I haven't posted anything. But I've started filming again. Not for her, not for views, not even for closure. But for that 17-year-old version of me, the one who believed people didn't change. Maybe he was wrong. Maybe people do change. And maybe, so can I. The day everything truly shifted wasn't the day Nancy dumped me on livestream. It was the day she tried to rewrite the story. It started when George tossed a folded newspaper onto the breakfast table. I was sipping black coffee, barely awake. Kathleen sat across from me, scrolling quietly on her phone. George's timing was always surgical. "Page 3, he said, sliding the mug toward me. "Bottom corner." I unfolded it lazily. The rise of healing queens, how Nancy turned heartbreak into her power era. There was a picture of her, sunlight brushing her face, airbrushed smile, mascara running like a carefully curated wound. The caption underneath? Nancy says, "He needed silence, and I needed growth. I set him free." I stared at it longer than I should have. Kathleen stopped scrolling. She didn't ask, she didn't need to. "She set me free?" I said finally, setting the paper down. She staged a breakup reveal with confetti. George was already loading the dishwasher. "You know the game. Truth doesn't trend, branding does." "She's rebranding me into her villain," I muttered. "She's monetizing closure," Kathleen said without flinching. That line hit hard, because it was true. I stood up, pacing toward the balcony. Below, the city pulsed like a giant breathing machine, people walking, laughing, rushing, posting. I used to think I'd belong in this mess, that I could remain human inside a system that profits from pretending. But Nancy, she dove into it like she was born for it. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed, a notification from a fan account I didn't even know existed. @Nancy Moments tagged you in a post. Nancy's past relationships, the truth we never knew. Slide 1, a screenshot of me crying during a QA video from 2 years ago. Slide 2, he always seemed distant. Slide 3, Nancy stayed strong through it all. The caption read, "Some men just don't know how to love a woman who glows." I didn't know what was worse, that Nancy had liked the post, or that nearly 70,000 people agreed. I turned off my phone. "Don't let her bait you," George said. "I'm not angry," I lied. Kathleen looked at me. "You're not angry, you're erased." That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to recall the last honest moment I shared with Nancy. Not the laughter on camera, not the kisses under fairy lights, something real. The answer came in the form of a memory I'd long buried. A year ago, in the middle of winter, Nancy came home late from a brand shoot. Her eyes were red, her voice tight. "What happened?" I asked. She shook her head, mumbling, "They said I wasn't pretty enough for the front cover." I remember holding her, not saying a word, just letting her collapse against me. She cried for 40 minutes. The next day, she posted a smiling selfie and captioned it, "Be the kind of girl who claps for herself when no one else does." None of her followers knew she broke down on our couch the night before, that I held her through it. And now she was reposting TikToks calling me a parasite, a dream killer, a low-vibrational man who dimmed her light. It was Kathleen who snapped me out of it. 2 days later, she entered the studio with a laptop in her hands. "She posted something new," she said. "Don't care," I replied. "She used a clip of you crying, from that Florence vlog you shot 2 years ago." That made me look up. Kathleen clicked play. Nancy's voice, smooth and rehearsed, filled the room. This was the night I realized I couldn't fix him. Some men just drown quietly and take you with them. She ended the clip with a fade to black and the words, "Healing doesn't require explanation, only release." Kathleen paused the video. "You know what she's doing, right?" "She's making me a case study," I said bitterly. "She's making you content," Kathleen corrected. Later that evening, I stepped outside for air. Kathleen followed. "You ever wonder," she asked, "if she loved you at all?" I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to. The next morning, I found a message from Nancy. Not a DM, not a call, a public comment. On a video I posted quietly, just me walking through a forest trail, no dialogue, no edits. She wrote, "Glad to see you doing well. I always knew you were talented when you weren't distracted by your emotions." I stared at the words, cold, sharp, wrapped in faux compliment. Then came a text, from George. "Check this out." Attached, a screenshot of Nancy's next scheduled podcast guest. Episode 12, Talking to the Woman He Chose After Me, with Kathleen. I froze. No way, no way. I ran to Kathleen's room. The door was already open. She was on a call. I stood there, silent, as I heard her say into the phone, "No, I told her I'm not comfortable with that title. If I'm going to speak, it won't be to frame David." Silence. Then she added, firmer, "This isn't your redemption arc, Nancy. Don't use me." She hung up and looked at me. "You saw it?" I nodded slowly. "She reached out last week," Kathleen said. "Told me it would help clear things up. Said I should share my truth." "You didn't tell me." "Because I didn't want to give it power," she whispered. For the first time, I felt a twist inside me I couldn't name. It wasn't betrayal, it was the fear of becoming the very thing I hated. "You know what she's trying to do, right?" I asked. Kathleen nodded. "If I speak, it adds fire. If I stay quiet, she gets to write whatever she wants." She stepped toward me, closer than she ever had before. "You said you didn't want revenge, but David, what if healing requires truth?" I didn't have an answer, and that's when I realized, the dilemma wasn't about Nancy anymore, it was about me. Was I going to keep letting her control the narrative, so I could say I took the high road? Or was I going to say something, not to destroy her, but to reclaim myself? Some mornings, I'd wake up and forget she was gone. The body adjusts faster than the heart. I'd reach across the bed expecting Nancy's curled figure there, her scent in the pillows, the way she mumbled in her sleep when she was dreaming about content ideas. The silence used to feel like peace. Now, it just felt like proof she'd replaced me with applause. The betrayal didn't hit all at once. It came in small waves. A coffee mug left behind. An old password I didn't change. Her name still labeled on a drawer in the bathroom. It wasn't just the loss of her, it was the erasure of myself that haunted me more. I wasn't mourning a person, I was mourning who I used to be around her. There was no closure, only exposure. Every day since the breakup, I lived with the tension of being a walking draft of someone else's content. Was she going to post another clip, mention me in a tweet, release a subtle jab under the guise of empowerment? She'd weaponized vulnerability and trademarked her trauma, and I was just the abandoned plot twist she never bothered to resolve. The worst part, everyone believed her. At a bookstore 2 blocks from George's place, I overheard 2 women whispering in the self-help aisle. I used to follow both of them, but he seemed so cold in their videos. She carried the whole relationship. Didn't she say he made her feel small? I was standing 5 feet away. I didn't speak, I just left, silent, invisible. Some nights, Kathleen stayed over in the guest room. She never tried to console me like everyone else did. No platitudes, no "you'll move on" optimism. She just sat beside me while I edited my videos or read quietly on the floor with a cup of ginger tea. And yet, even that comfort felt fragile, because as much as I trusted Kathleen, part of me feared losing her too. Not because she would leave, but because she would be taken, turned into another support, in character in Nancy's story. My mind kept replaying Nancy's public comment on my video, the one where she said I did better when not distracted by emotions. She knew exactly what she was doing. That wasn't a comment, that was a scalpel. I started avoiding mirrors, not for vanity, just because I didn't recognize myself anymore. My eyes always looked tired, my shoulders were tense, and when I spoke, even my own voice startled me, like I was watching myself from the outside. I wasn't healing. I was hiding. I tried journaling. George recommended it. The first page just said, what if she was right? That question rotted in me like acid. What if I was the problem? What if I really was too closed off, too distant, too low energy for someone like Nancy? What if I was emotionally unavailable, unlovable, unremarkable? She used to say things like that when the cameras were off. Subtle, soft-spoken cuts. You never fight for me. You're too quiet, it's like dating a ghost. I need passion, David, not stillness. I thought I was being patient, stable, grounded. But maybe to her, I was just empty. Kathleen noticed something was wrong long before I told her. One evening, she caught me standing in the dark hallway, holding a frame from Florence in my hand. I wasn't crying, just frozen. Like the moment was too sharp to move through. She didn't say anything. She just gently took the photo and placed it face down on the table. Then she whispered, "You're allowed to be angry." I didn't know what to do with those words. Because I wasn't sure if I was angry at Nancy, or at myself for letting her shape me into someone so easily forgotten. I had all these unfinished video clips in my hard drive, fragments, pieces, a close-up of a coffee cup trembling slightly as someone set it down, a 15-second clip of the city skyline before sunrise, a frame of my own reflection, slightly blurred, in the window of a passing train. They weren't stories, they were symptoms. Kathleen once watched them with me. She said, "This isn't content, this is grief, it's art, David, let it breathe." But I didn't know how. I didn't know how to speak without thinking of her viewers, her audience, her fan base, her spotlight. Every word I said felt like something that would be taken, edited, reposted, twisted. Even silence wasn't safe anymore. I started seeing Nancy in dreams. In one of them, she was on stage again, same confetti, same lights, but this time, I was the cameraman. No one saw me, I wasn't even listed in the credits. And when she smiled and thanked the person who taught me resilience, I smiled too, even as I bled from the mouth, because some part of me still wanted to be seen by her, even if it meant being used. That's when I realized, I wasn't just grieving her, I was grieving my own approval addiction, the need to be chosen, again, redeemed, proved worthy. Even now, I waited for her to text and say, "I exaggerated, I'm sorry, you're not a villain, you never were." But that apology would never come. Because in her eyes, I was no longer a person. I was an origin story, a narrative launchpad, a lesson in the caption of her next Instagram post. And so the silence grew heavier. I spoke less, smiled less, laughed almost never. Until one night, Kathleen knocked on my door. I didn't answer, but she came in anyway. She sat at the foot of my bed, handed me a folder, and said, "These are her podcast interview notes. A producer friend sent them. You should read them." I flipped it open. Inside were bullet points. Frame David as distant but kind, equal layered conflict. Mention Florence breakup rumor. End with growth quote. Some people are just detours. I dropped the folder. It wasn't just a breakup anymore. It was a script. That was the final wound. I wasn't heartbroken. I was violated, used, packaged, sold. I turned to Kathleen. My voice was calm, too calm. She was never with me, I said. She was always with her audience. I was just part of the lens. Kathleen didn't speak. She just placed her hand over mine, and for the first time in weeks, I let myself cry. No camera, no lighting, no story arc, just pain. Real, raw, unbranded. The invitation arrived like a blade wrapped in velvet. A pale ivory envelope with silver ink lettering, Reignite, the influencer relationship panel, and beneath it, hosted by Nancy Cumpy. A fireside discussion on post-breakup growth and emotional intelligence. Inside, there were names listed, Nancy, of course, a couple of beauty influencers, a self-proclaimed emotional coach, and then, at the bottom, a line that made my heart seize. Special appearance, Kathleen Morris. I reread it 3 times, then again under a brighter light, as if clarity was hiding between the lines. I stormed into George's work loft. He looked up from his laptop, eyebrow raised. "You knew?" I asked, tossing the invite onto his keyboard. He took one glance, sighed. "She said she was going to tell you." "When? After it aired?" She was hesitant, David. Said she turned them down at first. At first, I snapped. But she agreed later? He nodded slowly. She told me she was going to confront Nancy live, that this was the only way to end it. I felt my jaw clench. To end it? No, that wasn't what it felt like. It felt like betrayal all over again. Except this time, it came from someone who had seen the worst of me and chose to sit on a couch beside the woman who'd made a stage of my heartbreak. I left without another word. By the time I reached the apartment, Kathleen was already there, waiting on the balcony, the city glow brushing her skin in soft orange hues. "You got the invite," she said, before I even opened my mouth. "What the hell is this?" I asked, tossing the envelope on the floor. She turned to face me, calm, but tense. "It's not what you think." "No? Because from here it looks like you're about to become episode 14 of Nancy's redemption arc." "I'm not there to validate her," Kathleen said. "I'm there to challenge her." "In front of a camera?" I said bitterly. "Like everyone else." She looked pained. "David, I asked them to let me speak freely. I said I'd only appear if I could ask her the things no one else ever does. I want to say things people like us never get the chance to say, to the ones who manipulate, profit, and walk away." I shook my head, emotion choking my throat. "You could have told me." "I was going to," she whispered. "But I knew how it would sound." "And how does it sound now?" She stepped forward, slowly. "It sounds like I betrayed your silence, but I didn't. I wanted to protect you. I still do." "That's the thing," I replied. "You don't get to protect me by joining the people who broke me." Her eyes glistened. "You think I'm joining her? David, I'm going there to say everything you should have been allowed to say. Everything you held back because you're too good to sling dirt." I looked away. Kathleen continued, voice trembling. "She thinks you were weak. She built a whole empire on the lie that you couldn't handle her shine. But I saw you. I saw how many times you picked her up when no one was watching, how many of her breakdowns you edited out, how many tears you absorbed so she could smile for strangers." Her voice cracked. "She buried you beneath her brand and called it growth." Silence stretched between us, tense as glass. Finally, I spoke, quiet and broken. "And yet, she still wins. Even now. You're walking into her spotlight. You're letting her set the terms." Kathleen blinked, and a tear escaped down her cheek. "Then come with me." My heart dropped. "What?" "Come with me," she repeated, voice steadier now. "Sit across from her, say what you want to say, not for views, not for validation, for truth." I shook my head immediately. "You know I can't, that's her world." "It was," Kathleen said, "but it doesn't have to stay that way." She stepped closer, placed her hand on my chest. "Don't do it for her. Do it for the you who never got closure, for the version of you who watched her lie and couldn't stop her." I couldn't speak, because deep down, I wanted it. Not revenge, resolution. Nancy had rewritten everything, from our first kiss to our final message. She gave interviews like we were characters in her story, not people with our own versions. And part of me had been waiting for the day she'd sit across from me and be forced to see me. I didn't answer that night. I went to bed with my mind spiraling like a hard drive on the verge of crash. The next day, I watched the trailer. Nancy was in a white dress, her signature soft glow filter casting her in angelic light. "Sometimes," she said, gazing past the camera, "we outgrow people who don't want to grow with us. That doesn't make them villains. It just makes them the past." Cut to applause. I closed the laptop. George entered the room a minute later, holding his phone. "Kathleen wants to know if you'll be there. She says she won't go if you're not in the audience." I paused. Then I nodded. "Tell her I'll be there." Not for Nancy, not even for Kathleen. But for me. The day of the event arrived like static in my bloodstream. I wore a black button-down, clean jeans, boots. I didn't want to be flashy. I didn't want to look like I belonged. I wanted to feel real. Kathleen met me at the venue. Her expression softened the moment she saw me. "You okay?" "No," I said honestly, "but I'm here." The event space was drenched in muted golds and cream roses. Nancy had always known how to stage vulnerability, soft lighting, plush seats, a crowd full of curated empathy. When she walked out, the room fell silent. She looked right at me. For a moment, the smile cracked, and then it returned, picture perfect. She introduced the event with grace, talked about healing past versions and forgiving unaligned partnerships. Then she turned to Kathleen and said, "You've known me for a long time. How did you see that period of my life?" Kathleen didn't blink. She looked at Nancy and replied, "Like you were building an altar to yourself and offering David's heart as the sacrifice." Gasps in the audience. Nancy froze. Kathleen continued, voice level. "You didn't want healing, you wanted a villain, and you painted him with borrowed colors, edited context, and posted it for profit." Nancy tried to interject. "I never—" "You filmed his tears, you uploaded his silences, you made his restraint look like absence, you turned a quiet man into a ghost and called it empowerment." Nancy's jaw tightened. Kathleen finished, "You broke him in public, and now you're trying to convince the world that he deserved it." The room was dead quiet. I didn't speak, I didn't need to. The truth was no longer silent. It was finally heard. It wasn't scripted. There was no camera blocking, no rehearsal, no pre-interview brief, just a cold stage, warm lights, and two chairs facing each other. Me and Nancy. The moderator, some lifestyle guru hired by the event organizers, had vanished into the wings after Kathleen's takedown landed like a bomb. The audience murmured, shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the polished conversation they'd paid for. This wasn't influencer healing. This was something else, something unsanitized. Nancy glanced at me, chest rising and falling like she was trying to pace her breathing, like she knew she was losing control for the first time in a long time. I stared at her and waited. She was the one who invited me here, the one who thought she'd win on the same stage where she'd buried my name. "You came," she said softly. I did. There was a mic on the table between us. I didn't touch it. She did. "I want to clear the air," she said. "Things were said earlier that weren't entirely fair." "Which part?" I asked. "The part where you filmed my breakdown, or the part where you pretended it was yours?" She didn't flinch. "I never claimed—" "You used footage of me crying in Florence and said it was the night you realized I wasn't right for you. That clip," she began, eyes darting to the crowd, "was repurposed to reflect the emotional tone." "Repurposed?" I leaned forward. "I wasn't your Pinterest board, Nancy. I was your fiancé." A collective inhale swept the room. "David," she said, her voice trying to stay soft, performative. "I never meant to hurt you. You shut me out for years. I begged you to open up." I laughed once, just once, and it echoed. "You begged me to perform, Nancy, to cry prettier, to be poetic in pain. You didn't want my truth. You wanted my grief in 1080p. Her jaw twitched. I could see it now, the unraveling, the cracks in the porcelain mask. "Do you remember the night you got dropped from that mental health campaign?" I asked. Her lips parted, startled. "You came home, ripped off your wig, slammed your bag down, and said, 'I'm too complicated for brands now.' You were crying in the bathroom, and I sat outside the door for an hour." "I remember," she said quietly. "I filmed a soft rain clip that night for your background reel. You added piano music and said it was inspired by your emotional turbulence. But the only thing turbulent was your Wi-Fi." She clenched her jaw tighter. "I helped you build every scene, every angle, every mood board, every fake candid. You told people you were healing, but you never healed anything. You built a house from apology captions and sold tickets." Now she looked hurt, but not guilty. "You think I'm the only one who manipulated?" she asked. "You knew what I was. You stayed, you recorded, you edited, you helped, and you benefited." "No," I said. "I endured." I looked at her, not the influencer, not the brand, but the woman who once told me she couldn't sleep unless I whispered her name. "You think I didn't love you?" she asked, voice trembling now. "You think this was all fake?" "I think you loved the version of me that stayed quiet, that gave you space to become whatever you wanted to be. I think the moment I needed space, the moment I started asking for boundaries, you called it neglect." Her eyes glistened. Whether it was real or reflex, I didn't know anymore. "You never fought for me," she said. "I fought to stay. And still left." "No," I said. "You let go first. You just made sure I looked like the one who walked away." She turned to the crowd, breath shaky. "Fine," she said into the mic. "You want truth? Here it is." She looked at me, venom now replacing the pity. You're right, David. I used your silence. I sculpted pain out of your quiet, because silence is boring and sadness sells. I packaged us, I sold us, because I was afraid of being forgotten. A pause. The crowd was holding its breath. I thought, if I gave them enough vulnerability, they'd love me, that I'd matter. She looked down. And when you stopped letting me shape your sadness, I felt invisible. Her voice cracked. I didn't know how to be loved if I wasn't tragic. She looked up, her voice now a whisper only I could hear. I didn't know how to be enough, unless someone pitied me. That was the moment I saw her. Not Nancy the performer, not Nancy the villain, just a broken girl trying to stay relevant in a world that monetized misery. And I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Pity, but not for me, for her. I stood up, took a breath, and leaned into the mic. You don't owe me an apology, I said. She blinked, surprised. You owe yourself the truth. The crowd watched us, frozen between shock and reverence. I turned away from the mic. Faced her. Real, unfiltered. You'll keep performing, Nancy, because that's who you are. But when you're tired of applause, when the lights fade and the comments stop, I hope you find someone who loves you without a lens. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small silver bracelet she once gave me at our second anniversary shoot. I placed it gently on the table. Here, you can use it in your next campaign. Title it, What Letting Go Really Looks Like. She didn't speak, didn't move. And I walked off the stage. As I reached the curtain, Kathleen was there. Waiting. Watching. She didn't say a word. She just opened her hand. And I took it. For the first time, my story was not being taken from me. It was being held. The next day, Nancy released a post. Just one. Black screen. No caption, no hashtags. Just silence. I didn't expect the silence to be so loud after everything ended. After I walked off that stage and left Nancy in a spotlight she could no longer weaponize, I thought I'd feel triumphant, I thought I'd feel free. But what I really felt was empty. For the first time, there was nothing left to defend, no reputation to protect, no audience to disappoint, no stories being twisted into someone else's profit. Just the absence of noise. And in that stillness, I realized something chilling. Nancy hadn't ruined me. I had let myself disappear long before she ever picked up a camera. It was me who stayed quiet when she started editing our memories. It was me who approved thumbnails that turned our private arguments into relationship growth content. It was me who stopped telling stories when I felt like my voice wasn't marketable enough. But not anymore. Kathleen was the one who pulled me back into reality, not with grand speeches, not with affection, but with action. She moved into George's spare room a week after the panel, not because she wanted to be close to me, but because she said she was tired of pretending she didn't have her own life to live. I'm not here to be your shadow, she said while unpacking a box of books. I'm here to build something of my own. We didn't fall into love, we grew into it, over coffee, over rooftop silences, over long editing sessions and burnt toast. But even that wasn't the ending, not yet. Because 2 weeks after the panel, Nancy's docuseries dropped anyway. Episode 1 was called The Boy Who Watched Me Bloom. Same soft colors, same whispered voiceovers, same curated clips. But the difference this time, no one bought it. The comments were brutal, not from trolls, from people. So, is this the same guy you dumped live for engagement points? Didn't Kathleen expose all of this last week? This feels like emotional manipulation. On in 4K. One user simply wrote, sometimes the brand breaks before the person does. And just like that, the image cracked. Her followers dropped. Sponsors pulled out. One PR firm posted a story. We don't align with performative healing. I didn't celebrate, I didn't gloat, because karma doesn't need a microphone, it just needs time. And me? I finally went back to my camera. But not for likes, not for relevance, for a story I wanted to tell. Unfiltered, a quiet man's journal. A 6-part docu-series. No clickbait, no breakup drama, no celebrity cameos. Just me, exploring how it feels to be used, erased, doubted, and still find your way back to yourself. I interviewed other men who'd been silenced in relationships, ones who had been branded as emotionally unavailable when all they were was soft, cautious, real. I didn't promote it, didn't post trailers. I let the story speak. The world listened. Quietly, then louder. The series picked up traction, organically. It wasn't viral. It was felt. Emails flooded in, from sons, fathers, teachers, bus drivers, strangers in small towns. All saying one thing. Thank you for telling our story. And with each message, I healed. Not because I was seen, but because I remembered myself. One night, weeks after the last episode aired, Kathleen and I sat on the rooftop under string lights we'd hung with George. It wasn't fancy, but it was real. She rested her head on my shoulder and whispered, "You finally told your version." I nodded, and this time, I didn't edit the truth out. She smiled. "So what now?" I looked at her. "At peace," I said. "No revenge left?" I chuckled. Revenge was never the goal, just clarity. But then I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out a small package. She raised an eyebrow. Inside was a flash drive. Nancy's original Florence vlog footage. The raw, unedited truth. I made a copy before deleting it, I admitted. Kathleen didn't look shocked, just amused. "You kept it?" "Not to post, not to expose, just to remind myself how far I've come." She smiled and handed it back. "Burn it." I hesitated, then tossed it into the rooftop fire pit. It sparked, flared, disintegrated. No evidence, no receipts, no power left to hold over me, only freedom. And one final twist remained. George, brilliant and quiet as ever, came to me with a proposal. "There's a platform I'm building," he said. "It's not about followers, it's about storytelling, real voices, anonymous if needed, built for people who've been turned into content." He called it Unframe. I signed on as creative director. Kathleen joined as editorial producer. Together, we made something from the ashes, and then one day, Nancy showed up again. Not at my door, not online, at a private screening for Unfiltered, uninvited but unnoticed. She watched the whole thing from the back row, hood pulled low, silent. At the end, when everyone else stood to clap, she didn't move. As the crowd left, she approached. We stood face to face, no fans, no audience, just us. "I watched it," she said, voiced, hoarse. "All of it." I waited. "I didn't know you had all that inside you," she added. "I always did," I said. "You just never let me show it unless it fit your script." She looked away, then back. "I'm sorry." This time, she meant it. But I didn't need it anymore. "I forgive you," I said. Not for her, for me. She nodded. Then I walked out. No cameras, no captions, just silence. And that was the loudest closure I'd ever heard.